All right, welcome to It's a Pace podcast. My name is Don Jauber, and thank you for being here. I'm real excited about this. I got some notes I want to go through real quick on this first episode of It's a Pace podcast and make sure you guys understand exactly where I'm coming from, why I'm doing this, and the benefit why you should listen. Because who am I? Well, we'll get into that in future episodes, but I just want to talk about it's a pace. Pace is important. It's about business ownership. It's about ownership mentality. You don't have to own equity in a company to have ownership mentality. And when you have that ownership mentality, you really look at things differently. When you go to work in the morning, you are trying to solve problems on your drive in, on your way home. You could be on the golf course, on the beach, and you're still thinking about work. It doesn't consume you, but it's a different pace with that ownership mentality. So I used to call it hashtag pace of ownership, and I was like, well, not everybody's an owner, and I don't want to dismiss what you can do inside a company. So, and speaking of inside of a company, welcome to Exhibit Associates. I'm in the shop. What the good thing is nobody's here. And the benefit of nobody being here is I can actually talk and you can hear me. So I won't be able to do this view very often, but I just wanted you to see the shop or part of the shop. And the whole crew is out on an install right now. I am literally the only one in this building. So I've got over 20,000 square feet and I'm it. So I'm out here in the shop area, and we're going to be talking about It's a Pace podcast, and this is episode one. And again, thank you for being here. Now, why am I doing this? What drove me to videotape me, put myself out there, get criticized, get ready for you know Johnny Pants 568 from his mom's basement to say that's an ugly shirt. Well, the genesis of this goes back to about 10 years ago. I was a defense contractor in Afghanistan. Now, I went over to Kabul. I put it in context. I landed there the day they killed Osama bin Laden. So it was kind of a not only 24 hours of travel, but a very jarring landing because security was extra tight in Kabul. They were worried about reprisals. But I was over there for almost a year, had a great time, worked with some amazing individuals, and I had some great success, and I had some failures. Excuse my cough. It's not COVID. So anyway, Genesis was I went over there, and for my kids' sake, I wrote a blog. I'm from Overland Park, Kansas. Why am I going to Afghanistan? It made no sense. So I went over there, and part of the reason for the blog was I wanted my kids to read it, and they were a little too young right now, and I don't know if they'll ever go back and read it. But when I go back and read it, some of those things like, yeah, that was really cool. Hey, that is something I really did. Oh, that really sucked. Uh, but I distilled it down to about 10 important lessons and 10 specific blogs. And so I looked at those lessons, those 10 principles, foundations, those 10 foundations, and said, well, I learned that back when I was in the Air Force, or I learned that when I did my first startup, or I learned that when I did my second startup, or I learned that um, when I first went to work for corporate America. And I said, well, these foundations are kind of key. They're kind of critical. And so over the last 9 years, we've been following anything about trade shows. The last year and a half has been a shit show. Absolutely. Pandemic. Well, as a new owner to Exhibit Associates in 2012, we had some other issues that we had to worry about. So we did. We went through the issues. We fought through them. Everything is going great. Pandemic hits. We're restarting the company. We're relaunching the company. We rebranded everything. We did this. And now I'm looking at those 10 foundational principles and saying, how can we apply them here? Wait a minute. This can work anywhere. Maybe I should share these. So I said, why not? Why not share what is these 10 foundational principles of business, of life, of leadership, interview some amazing individuals that I know, and some I don't know. I'm asking for them to be part of the interview, and wait till you see. I got a very very special guest as our first guest, and they'll be coming up maybe early next week as my first guest in this podcast. And I actually he helped in my brain formulating this podcast. So Anyway, so I go to Afghanistan. I write a blog post looking back, reflecting after the fact, saying, hey, these 10 foundational principles really are successful. They worked for me in the past when I was in the Air Force, when I went to corporate America, when I did my first startup, when I was part of another startup. Um, and now I'm applying them to exhibit associates and getting success. We're having one of our best years ever from a profit margin perspective. It's amazing. So from that blog to this podcast, thank you for playing along. And we'll cover those 10 foundational principles. And as you can see, I'm not a professional at this. I am just going off of what I think will be beneficial to you. And again, what are those 10 things? Well, you're going to have to stay tuned to find out. The foundation was when I was in Afghanistan. Uh, Past success primarily unknowingly fed me to those 10 foundational principles that I wrote about in this blog for my kids. And now here I'm applying them at Exhibit Associates. So, again, we'll focus on life, we'll focus on leadership, we'll focus on fitness, we will focus on trade shows, of course, these 10 principles, and I'll have some great interviews along the way. So, there's just a lot to cover in a podcast. And I just want to say thank you. And again, I don't know if I touched on this, but since this team is out doing an install, nobody's here, this is why I'm in the shop. So you won't see this background very often. I just want to say welcome to It's a Pace podcast. This is the very first episode. Stay tuned. It should be fun. Thanks for playing along.